Good evening and welcome to The Square. Tonight is Viewers Edition 31, where we, the resident panelists on The Square, discuss issues that our esteemed and loyal viewers over social media platforms have recommended. Key amongst the topics we're going to be discussing tonight include Rwanda's leadership as well as membership to international organizations. What does this mean for Rwanda? What does this mean for Rwanda's economy? And what benefits and opportunities present themselves? We're also going to look at healthcare, looking at private and healthcare, and some key sort of changes that really have an impact on Rwandan citizens and health insurance holders. And last but not least, we're going to look at the high price of commodities and the increased cost of living for Rwandans in the country. My name's Dan Mpisi, host of The Square, as always, on Viewers Edition. I'm joined by The Square's and panelists, and I'll start with Berna Namata, who's not been with us for a while. We really missed her. Berna, great to have you on The Square again.
Thank you. I
great.
missed you too.
How are your travels?
Good.
Good.
Yeah.
Good to have you back.
Thank you.
As always, you're also joined by Charles Haba. Charles, always a pleasure to have you on the show.
Same here, Dana. How are you?
Good. Great. So, yes, I'd also like to tell our viewers to keep their comments coming using hashtag TheSquareRW, and we'll be reading them out later on. And, thank you as always, Viewers Edition viewers who put forward these comments for the guests, the resident panelists, to discuss once a month. So we're going to kick off with Rwanda's leadership, as well as Rwanda's membership in international organizations. In addition to active membership to over 80 and counting regional and global organizations, we're also witnessing leadership of Rwandans in global communities, global organizations such as the Commonwealth, witnessed by the chair in office that was handed to Rwanda for the next 2 years, just last month, as well as La Francophonie, led by a Rwandan. So my question to you, Charles and Berna, in your opinion, what does this mean for Rwanda in terms of many things that include trade and economic opportunities, but also importantly in terms of global influence when it comes to issues ranging from education, security, health, climate change. So these are some of the questions I'm asking the resident panelists, and we'd like to hear from you, the viewers, later on tonight. And Berna, I'll kick off with you.
I think before I talk about trade and the economic opportunities, I think what we see from what is already visible from Rwanda's membership to these organizations, one, an opportunity to export Rwandan values.
Yes.
It's not by accident that Rwanda is leading these organizations. It's because they have something to contribute, and there's already an established record to that effect. And again, we continue to see that there's a lot of visibility on Rwanda because, again, of linked to that membership. And I think we had this joke in our group about Chogam doing more for Visit Rwanda than the Arsenal.
Or PSG deals.
Yes, we need our money back. So, one, a good opportunity to export Rwandan values, two, in terms of visibility, but also for economic opportunities. Potentially, you have markets around the world. Now, I think whereas we've made so much progress in terms of the leadership itself, and by this, for instance, if I could speak to when Rwanda was chairing AU, we saw that the reform process went quite smoothly. And for the first time, I think we have a lady at the AU, the deputy chairperson is from Rwanda. And since then, we've seen really a new kind of wind of change around the AU. Today, the AU takes a lead on many issues, including the Peace Fund, which for a very long time, for instance, was underfunded. Under the leadership of Dr. Kaberuka, we see that he's managed to mobilize funds for the Africa Peace Fund under the AU. We are seeing more efforts around preventive diplomacy. Again, we see Rwanda taking on global responsibilities around peacekeeping missions. So overall, we're doing well on that front. But also, I mean, as you take on this, even when we have economic opportunities, I think the challenge is how prepared Rwandans to tap into these doors that have been opened by the leadership. We see a gap, for instance, in terms of language on both sides, whether it's Commonwealth or the Francophonie. The challenge right now is that the majority of Rwandans actually are fluent in Kinyarwanda, and that's it. You still have a few that can only speak English or can actually are fluent in French. So to be able to take advantage of these opportunities, we have to do more to have more Rwandans that are bilingual and fluent. Because sometimes I feel we claim to be bilingual, but I wouldn't say that.
Actually multilingual.
You know. Yes, yes. It's a small group, really. It's a small group that is being exposed, well-educated, that is actually multilingual. So we cannot yet claim that the majority of Rwandans can speak fluently English, French, and any other languages. So there's room there to really have language centers. Today you see most of it around schools, especially the English language. Now with the French coming in, I think the Secretary General was talking about training of Rwandan peacekeepers in French. So we need to see more of that. Language centers outside the formal setting. And by that I mean outside the French embassy or outside government. You need places where Rwandans can go for evening classes, for instance, and learn French or English. And now, increasingly, of course, even Swahili. We are seeing that there's a push, a Pan-African push for Swahili as a language. So you need more Rwandans to be able to speak Swahili. Yeah, and that takes a deliberate approach. Yeah, beyond what we are seeing in schools, to also give an opportunity to those who are already working to be able to learn these languages. The other challenge I think I see with these opportunities also is in terms of skills.
So the opportunities are there, but the challenge for us
yes,
is our
yes,
skill set and
yes.
the capacity of our
so
skills
there's
Rwanda,
the challenge of language. Because if these markets are open and you're going to, for instance, do business in Central Africa, you need a bit of French. You have to be fluent in French. So how many of us can claim, personally, I'm challenged. I would love to learn French, and I'm still working my way around it. I even want to speak Swahili too. Yeah. The other issue is around skills. Rwanda's aspirations around becoming upper middle income or middle income are linked also to the push with these membership to organizations. But we see a challenge around skills. We don't yet have a critical mass of skilled people to be able to transition, whether with, because when you refer to the strategy, Rwanda 2030, 2050, the goal is export-oriented, but also knowledge around the knowledge economy. Now, if we are saying we are going to export, what exactly are we exporting, whether it is in terms of products, but also in terms of skills? We still have a gap there, so there's more that needs to be done for us to fully take advantage of these opportunities.
Thank you very much, Brenna. Charles, over to you.
I think, first of all, by virtue of the fact that Rwandan or Rwandan candidates are ascending to these global positions is definitely not handed on a silver platter. It's because we've earned our seat at the table to dine with the men. Excuse my chauvinistic choice of words.
The big boys.
Yeah. So we are rightfully chilling with the big boys, hence the reason why we are at the helm of a lot of these institutions, and I believe there is more to come. That said, I think, however, there is a very important discussion that we need to have about managing expectations. Mm-hmm. Yeah, managing expectations. There is some of these institutions are too amorphous, mm-hmm. or politics will come into play. So, and I'll speak to those two different points in different languages. So, managing expectations versus President Kagame being at the chair of CHOGM, we need to understand that the way the Commonwealth Secretariat works, that it may not be surprising that the person in the chairmanship can influence many decisions, and therefore maybe the person and the Secretary General or the person who runs the Secretariat is a person in the driving seat, which makes more sense why the ascension to chairmanship is not as dramatic as the SG elections. And then when you go to Francophonie, you will see that the level of lobbying and everything that we needed to do to get Mushikiwabo to be at the helm of that institution may not be as comparable as inshallah Biruta becoming the next boss of Francophonie. So and that's the institutional nature of such institutions, that excuse my repetition, that this functionality of the Secretariat sometimes carries more weight than the chairmanship per se, and then therefore the chairmanship quite regularly you might find that it is predominantly ceremonial. But then let's go to the politics, and I'll give a classic example of the East African community. So constitutionally, according to the East African Charter, it is rotational. So Rwanda had the chairmanship of the East African community at a time when we were not looking eye to eye with Uganda. Did that help our issues in any way? Probably not. Did it? If the chairmanship of the East African community at that time was held by a very neutral person, would it have allowed us to talk a little bit better? Probably yes. The DRC is a new kid on the block on the East African community. Assume tomorrow Tshisekedi became the president, and it's a very close assumption if he wins his presidential election, if at all the elections happen. If he's a chairman of the East African community and we are still quarreling, will that help in any way? Definitely not. So that's the politics of these positions and how they do not help in any way. But then, let me link it up to the importance of the institutions. Even if you're having political quarrels as countries, the functionality of the institutions does not come to a halt. The East African community has been functioning as an institution despite the fact that one partner state and the other are always quarreling periodically. So the bigger point I'm raising really is about managing expectations. It does not mean, and I will slightly disagree with Bana on this one about giving an example of the AU reforms. I think that was a bit of an exception because the AU reforms had been driven by the AU also is unique in its nature because you have an AU commission that comprises the outgoing chairman, the incumbent chairman, and the incoming chairman. But you also have the fact that cleverly Rwanda had put in place a team comprising the likes of a celebrated AFDB president in Don Kaberuka, who was then a very easy candidate to sell in terms of moving reforms and what have you. So that if you put those pieces together, they helped a lot. So when you come to these other bodies that we are ascending into, I think from a strategic point of view, the emphasis should be more on sitting at the helm of the secretariats, because that's actually where the business is done. Yes.
So managing expectations on your end, and some of these positions are more ceremonial than strategic, in terms of thinking of impact.
Yes, in terms of yes. And I want to suggest one more thing, but that we need to take it a notch higher and say Rwanda is very heavily vested today in our MICE tourism agenda. The levels of conferences we are hosting, and those that we are about to host, and those that we shall host forever, is extremely high, and the sky is the limit. Now, the next thing should be, now that we're having all these conferences coming up, how many of these bodies can we actually move here to be headquartered? So it's not enough for us to only be having guests to go and dance in Voltage and fly around there, but to actually spend their money here. And I know there's a move in that direction. The FEDA's coming in, the FIFA development committees coming in. There's a few host agreements that the government of Rwanda has successfully bid for, and that's a step in the right direction. I think that is one direction that we should take. Then it means that in addition to the influence that you have in having your individuals at the helm of the bodies, you're also able to host it. Then that's where actually the real influence comes in.
And that's when you see the leverage of utilizing these global positions. Brenna, over to you before we go to the next point.
Yes, just to say that I agree with him that you need to manage expectations, but I would think that managing expectations is more about understanding how these institutions work. You know, if it's, for instance, the Commonwealth is largely by consensus, you know, and there's no binding treaty to force countries to do certain things. So even if you're chair and you have certain aspirations, to the extent that people must buy into, you know, countries must buy into your ideas, and if they don't, you can't move forward. That is a challenge. Secondly, if we look at the financing of the Commonwealth, it's largely, you have the ABCD, ABC, I think, Australia, you have the US, you have, not the US, United Kingdom, you have Canada, and New Zealand, who largely fund the Commonwealth. In addition to the other countries, you know, the majority of the membership, comes from these countries. You know, so in a way, even those countries dictate what you do. You know, so even that really limits you in terms of what you can do. But coming back to what the opportunities are for Rwandans, I think we need to look at it as setting up a road somewhere. You know, once you set up the road, then you have the cars moving, and then you're opening up,
to different destinations.
Yes, and so linked to my earlier comment on skills, if we are saying we are moving beyond sending Rwandans to head these institutions, we want to actually host them. One, the reality is there's a lot of competition, even in the neighborhood, to be in the same space to host these institutions. We are seeing Kenya is actually quite ahead. And what are the things they're looking at? Skills is one of them. If you're going to move the UN to Rwanda headquarters, can you get the skills that you need at an affordable rate locally? You know, So some of these issues play into it, and it's good that we kind of think about them.
Yeah, I totally hear you on your point regarding skills, especially because, you know, I feel like our leadership has walked the talk, and, you know, these are decisions, positions based on merit. It's not someone doing us a favor at all. So, you know, leadership has walked the talk in terms of not only making Rwanda part membership of these organizations, but also, you know, various individuals through merit and that sort of thing, actually leading these organizations. So I think on the macro level, that's done. You come to the micro level when you're looking at Rwandan skill sets. We talk about this a lot on the show. Infrastructure around, you know, enabling the environment even more than what government has done. The private sector, for instance, these institutions, a lot more needs to be done, especially in terms of capacity building. So it's interesting to hear from both of you, and to our viewers, you know, what do you think Rwanda's membership and leadership in these global organizations means for the country? So, you know, feel free to share your thoughts. We'll be reading them out later on our Twitter feed. I'd like to go to the next topic, which is to do with health insurance. And here, time allowing, we'll look at private health insurance as well as insurance, community-based health insurance. So recently, the government Rwanda decided on what is known as the capitation model. Capitation model is a form of payment where health service providers receive a fixed amount of money on a regular basis. This money is a fixed amount of money upfront for each person, as opposed to the free for service payments. So previously, health insurance would have to send invoices to, for instance, Rwanda Social Security Board, wait for reimbursement for Rwanda Social Security Board, and, you know, there's a sort of backlog in this process, and also this transferred to issues health insurers adopted from this process. So with for instance, they'll probably give, you know, 10 million francs to a health insurance facility. They'll be able to buy necessary equipment for testing. They'll be able to buy whatever it is they need to do. So when you come and you need to be treated, it's possible. So my question to start with, CBH, you know, Mitwell de Santé, community-based health insurance. What do you think of this capitation model? Do you think it has more pros than cons? Will we see an improvement in terms of accountability for some of these, you know, health service providers? And Charles, I'll kick off with you before we go to Berna.
It's first of all important to understand why health providers and medical health companies, medical health insurance companies have been at loggerheads. It's about one thing: how you pay us, and the us being the health providers, and the insurance companies about how you bill us. The medical facilities have one major complaint: that you delay, that the health insurance companies delay to pay them. The medical insurance companies have one major complaint: that the health providers, health service providers, are cheats.
They're fraudulent.
Yes.
Yes.
So, why is it that there is a cash flow problem? There's a cash flow problem because the clinics do not have money because they have not been paid on time. Now, if there's anyone who has money in the world, it's the insurance guy, because we are always paying, and we're hardly ever claiming our insurance, right? So it's from the naked eye, it looks heavily skewed in the favor of the medical facilities. But this is what's going to happen. If we do not scrutinize exactly why the medical health insurance providers delay to pay, we will miss the point. Because the problem has only been looked at from a cash flow perspective. So this guy is saying we don't have money to treat you. Now, it is very easy for the government of Rwanda to make a lazy decision and be in favor of the patients because there's life at stake. On the other side, there's only money at stake, right? But
But what do you mean by it's very easy for the government to be...
Yes, because
a lazy decision.
A delay in me treating you as a doctor can cost you your life. A delay in me delaying to pay your medical bills, you've already been treated.
But government with this capitation model is trying to fix that issue by saying, you know, on a monthly basis, we are giving you the health facility for each person that you build. This is the amount. This solves the problem.
But this is, it does not solve the problem at all, and I'll tell you how it does not. Let's look at fraud, some of the cases of fraud that are happening. You have somebody called Charles Mshisi, who comes and claims that they are 7 months pregnant and they are given antenatal medication. Biologically they cannot, but because there's somebody, there's a female in the Mchisi family who can get, who has medical insurance, I then access your medical insurance. You have cases of clinics that do not even have an X-ray machine that claim that they have actually conducted MRIs and CT scans. So what's going to happen is that that same fraud that has been happening in these medical spaces will continue to happen, because after all, they have been paid. Imagine they were claiming money, yet they had not done the service. Now they have the money.
So you're saying they were claiming money fraudulently?
Yes. No.
Before, when they had no money.
Now
the fact that
being abated. Yeah. But there's a solution to this, and I think there is laziness on the part of the insurance providers. They need to be speaking one language, which what the medical providers have done. They've spoken in unison, and government has listened to them. The medical insurance providers need to speak in unison about a system that speaks to everyone. At the time you key in and take your thumbprint at any centre de santé anywhere in the country, in real time, that data is able to be linked to your Mitwell de Santé or Prime or Britam or whatever insurance company you belong to. The problem they have had is that they have not invested in systems that are integrated. So if I went to King Faisal or to Baho or to whatever clinic in real time, that information, it has happened to me in the past that I have to drive my car from medical facility X to my insurance company to actually prove that I am the one before I'm given a CT scan.
So there needs to be like serious controls put in place.
And the reason why why I'm inconvenienced that way is because the medical facilities are not trusted by the insurance companies. So systems, invest in the systems is the only way to resolve this. There might be hesitance in among certain players in investing in these systems because fraud benefits many people. So if it's not only the medical facilities that are benefiting from this fraud, probably even the pharmacists, probably even certain individuals within the medical insurance companies are benefiting from this. So there's only one way to cut out this fraud, and it's by investing in systems. Yes.
And controlled to make sure you know what is being said is being done. Brenna, I want to go to you, but from a private healthcare perspective. Charles has talked more on the community-based health insurance system with the new capitation model. Like I said, it's where government gives health service providers for each person a fixed amount of money, and these health facilities are able to do what they're supposed to do. But I want to talk about private healthcare. And this, earlier on, actually on the show this year, we saw, we had a show about it where private healthcare facilities decided to drop contracts with various insurance firms. Of course, this decision was rescinded very quickly. But still, it made us insurance holders, we were at a lurch. I know there was a lull for around almost a week. If someone was sick at that time, it could have been fatal if they went to the hospital and they said, we're no longer with Britam, or we're no longer with Old Mutual. So it showed the vulnerability of you and I as insurance holders. And my question to you, Brenna, and I'd like to hear from our viewers later on, is in terms of private healthcare in this country, healthcare insurance, what do you think are some of the key issues, number one, and if you can be as brief as possible in the interest of time, and not only key issues, but also looking at what can be done in terms of regulation to really protect health insurance holders from these sort of squabbles that we saw early on this week, for instance, early on this year, sorry.
I wish I had studied actuarial science. I would provide a more informed view, but very quickly, I really want to comment on Mitwell because I think Mitwell is the best thing that has happened to Rwanda among the many other innovations. And so every effort has to be made to make it better, to protect it. And I think the fund system that they're introducing, I'm not as pessimistic as
Charles.
Yes, as Charles.
Charles, I thought you'd be excited.
I think the fund
there's nothing to be excited about.
Wow.
Yes.
Okay.
RSSB is working so hard to make Mitwell efficient. So we need to give them a benefit of doubt to test some of these things and see how they work. Yeah. And like I said, every effort has to be made to protect Mitwell, strengthen it, and even make it better. I think as a country, we'll benefit more if we have a more functioning Mitwell.
Absolutely.
At the moment, when you go to most of these private healthcare providers, it is very unfortunate that Mitwell, people who use Mitwell will be at the back of the queue most of the time. Part of it is because private healthcare providers are worried about their money. It is quite unfortunate. So if this fund can address some of those issues, I'm good. Now, going back to the private health insurers, I think there's a big problem there. Again, because I haven't studied actuarial science, I don't know what the fundamentals are, but as a user, I just feel I'm being, held on ransom because I don't have a choice. So these providers sit in a room and decide that this is what we are going to do.
Can you give a concrete example? What do you think you're held at ransom?
So most recently, this is what we are grappling with.
Yes.
Some companies have 100% cover for their staff. As you're trying to renew, they tell you, no, there's a directive. We agreed as a
body, of
of insurers that we will introduce co-pay 10%. So it doesn't matter what our company policy is. We want to ensure that our staff access medical care when they need it. 100%.
Yes.
Insurers have said, no. We want to stop the abuse of their cover by introducing co-pay 10%. Why am I being punished? Because if you're saying you're trying to prevent whether it's fraud or abuse, why don't you specifically target institutions or agencies that have abused the cover? Why do you come up with a blanket, reaction to everyone? Because there are numbers. You can actually look at assess how each institution or company is using their cover. You even have room to raise the premium, but to sit and say, no, we want to discourage abuse of the cover in general, and you must pay 10%. 10%, and it beats the whole sense around insurance. I shouldn't have a worry. The whole point of taking insurance is that in case I don't have cash, I'm covered. Now you're telling me I must have cash every time I go to health facility.
It's its purpose.
It beats the whole point. And here's the bigger problem. The regulator says, because, that's private business. We don't get involved in how they run, But again, as an end user, I'm being punished. So who do I go to? Now, going back, revisiting the issue that we saw when...
In January.
Yes, providers again waking up one morning and saying, no, you cannot access. As a consumer who is innocent, who has paid their premium, I'm being punished just because two people have disagreed. And there's no one, watching these two to make sure that I don't get inconvenienced.
And don't get stepped on. And
yes,
I know when we discussed this in January with some of the the insurance firms here, we also had someone representing regulation here. The key question was what is being done about consumer protection when it comes to health insurance. This was in January. We're in July.
Yeah.
There's really no big change. And
we really have a big problem with consumer rights, consumer protection. And I think it's very unfortunate for our country. Yes, you want to promote private investment, you want, because there's a background to all this, the insurance companies have been making losses and they're trying to be innovative, and get better ratios, But I think there are better ways, efficient ways of making money, getting ratios without necessarily, penalizing the end users.
Interesting. That's good. I want us to go to the next topic. And I like the fact that there's been debate around this for sure. The capitation model, but also looking at consumer protection. I agree with you on that one, Brenna, in terms of what more is being done to protect the consumer when it comes to health insurance. And I'm really hoping, the policymakers or people who actually provide these services are watching, and there's some solutions that we're going to see, at least before the year ends. Based on what we saw in January, that was a bit alarming. I want to go to the next topic, which is really the hike in commodity prices. So whether it's an effect of, the COVID-19 pandemic and disruption of global, supply chains, whether it's due to the Russia-Ukraine war, what's been happening, not only in Rwanda, but, in the region and across the world, but we are feeling it in Rwanda, was an increase in the prices of goods and services, which increased by 13.7% in June 2022 compared to June 2021, and a 0.8% increase on a monthly basis, and commodity prices, everything from foodstuffs to fuel to that sort of thing. So my question to you, and I'll kick off with you, Charles and Berna, is what alternatives do you suggest in trying to avoid importing inflation and looking at what Rwanda can innovatively do in dealing with this high cost of living in the country? And I'll kick off with you, Charles.
First of all, it's for people to understand, that this is not unique to Rwanda. It's a global problem. Prices of basic commodities have increased globally, and people should not come up and say, the Minister of Finance doesn't like me because I stole a plot of his in the village. No. It's a global problem. That said, some of these things require very tough personal decisions, because when prices hike, when things change, they affect you personally. Kids went on holiday a few weeks ago, and they went on holiday at a time when, excuse my Spanish, it was a mating season, so there was a lot of weddings happening. But there was a lot of weddings happening whilst the diaspora was around on holiday. And that was happening while there are lots of events happening. There's Chogam, there's Seka Live, there's Jazz Junction, life has to happen. At a time when we have just come out of a pandemic, and therefore we have just been let loose of.
Yeah.
But it also happened at a time when, and I'll just give an example, as you're considering all this, if your weekly expenditure of fuel was 20,000, it's all of a sudden shot to about 35,000 because the price of fuel has increased. Now, of all those things, what are you going to do? Are you going to tell your children not to go on holiday? Are you going to
not contribute to the wedding,
are you going
the
to
wedding
not
season?
Going to contribute to the season? Are you going to say no? Hang on a second. Lockdown. Can you bring another wave of lockdown and we stay indoors? No. Life must go on. So I want to bring this out in a bit of a light way and refer to the lockdown again. A very good friend of mine was drinking the best gin that there was on the market at the beginning of the lockdown. the government of Rwanda was giving us the doses in 2 weeks. So they would say 15 days and they would give you hope. So he started out with premium gin. As the days progressed, by month 2, he was on Gordon's gin. By month 5, he was on Gilby's gin. By the time the lockdown ended, he was the biggest fan of Konyagi, which is probably the cheapest gin you can find on the market. Now, this guy, we were having the conversation the other day, and I told him it's probably time to revisit Konyagi, even though we are out of lockdown. So what's the story? The story is that tough times require tough decisions.
Yes.
And we all have to accept it. We all have to accept it that expenditure, some things we can do with, some things we cannot do without. Those that we can do without, let's find the next best alternative. I'm not going to advocate for replacing cassava with bread, but I think tough times require for tough decisions. Let's all tighten our nooses. That's the second point I wanted to raise. The third one I really want to raise is that, you see, we all rely, and even if you're a first world economy, we always rely on governments to come to our rescue. The government of Rwanda has been extremely fantastic when it has come to giving subsidies, and definitely Rwanda was the last country to increase fuel prices.
Yes, I was going to say, especially on fuel.
in our region.
Yes.
Here. We still remain the lowest. The players in that space are not too happy about it, but it's a significant role of the government. Have they done a lot? Definitely yes. Can they do better? Definitely yes. And sometimes even look at things like the biggest employer is the Ministry of Public Service. Even if they increased staff salaries by 0.1%, and the hyperbole is intended, it would still come back to the economy of the other guy who rides a motor, the guy who sells mandazis, the guy who sells sugar, and so on and so forth. Even if they reduced VAT, for argument's sake, by 0.1%, again, that little saving would still come back to the same person who is selling the different goods and services. So I think, again, it comes down to the same thing. Tough times require tough decisions on both sides, on the side of the consumer and on the side of the person who's paying.
Just before I get to Brian, I agree with you, but I feel like that's also being a bit too lax on government agencies that are really, I know they're doing their best, but are really tasked with dealing with this sort of issues. I know today, for instance, somewhere, and I was watching with someone, the whole Ministry of Trade was called, to Parliament by senators to account for what does our membership to these regional bodies do, especially in terms of trade and economy. Yes, I know the Ukraine-Russia war is happening, but what innovations are on the ground? You can't say it's because of this, or it's because we're landlocked, or because, yes, this is happening, yes, it's tough times, but can this push us to think out of the box a bit more than we usually do? Can we look at alternative sources of what we were relying on previously before this disruption of global value chains? So my thing is, if anything, I feel like it should push us. The pressure should, what's that saying, that a diamond becomes a diamond from the rough because of the intense pressure it undergoes. Why don't we kind of think along those lines in looking at these global issues and saying, let's look inwards, like we did with the pandemic and various issues, to deal with these things. So yes, tough times call for tough measures, but tough times also call for innovation. And
absolutely,
personally,
yes.
That's what I'd be looking for some of these government organizations and stakeholders that are tasked with dealing with this issue regarding, the hike in commodity prices. Yes, over to you, Bryna.
As Charlie was speaking, I couldn't help judge him. He's so elitist. He's talking about weddings, taking children on vacation, whiskey. I judged you. I'm like, look at this guy.
Spoiled
elite.
brat.
Yes, so spoiled.
elitist.
Because here's the fact, yeah? If you look at what's driving inflation right now, that should be of major concern. Fresh food. We're talking about food. And we know from various studies that price shocks hurt the most vulnerable.
Absolutely.
Because for them, it's a choice between the basics. You know, we're talking about food. Yeah. Now, if we are, yes, global inflation is a problem. I mean, as of today, I think the Canadian Central Bank has hit a record. It raised its repo rate by 100, base points.
Yeah.
And, central banks around the world are trying to deal with this. But let's go back home and speak to our reality. We're talking about food really driving, because usually it's food and transport that drives our inflation for the majority.
Yes.
Those are the things they're grappling with.
Those are the shocks that are felt by most people.
Yes, by most people.
Yes.
Now, government has worked so hard, thanks to the subsidies that they've maintained, one on transport. It could be worse. But what can we do? What are we doing about agriculture? Improving productivity for agriculture. As we speak, the reason we have a spike is because the season did not do well because of the weather. We've been talking about irrigation for a very long time. Every budget that is read, there's an amount allocated to irrigation.
Yeah.
When are we going to reap the benefits of this? Because as it is, we continue to rely so much on rain. When there's no rain, we have issues. That has nothing to do with Ukraine. Yeah. So first of all, for me, yes, I feel that we need to do more to ensure that we move away from depending on rain. That's one. Two, the issue around fertilizers. It's going to get worse now because with the planting season, with the current shocks around supply of fertilizers, inputs, the costs are going up. It's going to get worse.
What are we doing about that?
What are we going to do about our agriculture sector? So for me, the main intervention has to be around agriculture right now, because everybody needs food, everybody eats food. We have to really think about the vulnerable homes.
Thank you. Thank you, Brenna. We're running out of time. I want to read a couple of tweets in the 1 minute we have. If we could have this on our screen. So the first tweet on our screens, please, is coming from Ruhamia, who says, the capitation model can surely solve the fundamental concerns by both the insurance and providers, as Charles Haber says. The question is, will healthcare providers still uphold quality of care even after they have pocketed the money? This really puts Rwanda Health to test. These are some of the tweets we have time for, but I think that's a very valid question. And one of the things we're talking about this whole capitation model is really rigorous controls. And what we're also picking up, from you, Brenna, is consumer protection of the health insurer. We really shouldn't be, that saying, when two elephants fight, it's the grass that suffers. I think Rwandans deserve better than that. So thank you very much. These are some of the comments that we had, unfortunately, because we're running out of time, Charles. It's been great listening to you. Thank you for your insightful comments. Brenna, as always, very, profound statements from you, and always thinking about the common man and woman. Charles, next week we'll decide if you're as elitist as Brenna said. But
I need to buy her food.
You need to buy her food. Yeah, but as always, just very dynamic conversations between the both of you. To our viewers, thank you for tuning in. Keep the conversation going using #TheSquareRW. We'll be engaging online even after the show, like we always do. To our partners, Uzi Collections, as well as Bourbon Coffee, thank you for always supporting The Square. Have a good night. See you again next week.